I have very little use of theory. We're not going to reason our way to the infinite, in my perspective. And it's best not to have solid beliefs, but to be open and to experience the higher spiritual realities. That said, we are given an array of tools, such as symbols and myths. Okay, we have tools such as symbols and myths. And so while I don't like to think about theories too much, we come to a question. Reasoning is a tool, so why not use reason? Maybe we can't approach the infinite, but we could kind of use what we have. So let's take a look at theory in Western occultism, in the history of Western esotericism. Well, so how does a symbol tie to a force? How could a symbol tie to a force, an actual force? How can you take a symbolic thing like an image and tie it to an actual force that we could harness? So here is one theory on that. If we take the idea that the soul of man is tied to the universe, the soul of a human being is tied to the universe. If we have as above, so below, if we take this doctrine of the macrocosm and the microcosm, maybe it can help us out a little bit with how a symbol could tie to an actual force. If the microcosm is a reflection of the macrocosm, if a human being is the universe in miniature, then there would be some tie between the soul of a human being and the universe. Now, if there is a tie between the soul of a human being and the universe, then symbols impressed upon the consciousness can harness forces. So, today I'm kind of talking about the tree of life and the Kabbalah and how this universal glyph may possibly access real forces like Mars or Venus energy. Let's say that there is an energy behind it all. It's not just thought, it's form, or it's force and form. The thought or the idea is the form and the force. If there's a force behind it, how could a symbol contact forces? Well, if we say that the soul of man is tied to the universe in any way, if the soul of a human being is tied to the cosmos, then a symbol such as the tree of life impressed upon the consciousness can then become a doorway. The tree of life. When we truly understand the Sephiroth and the paths, for example, or any other such symbol or glyph, contemplating the image, it impresses upon our consciousness. It's impressed upon our soul. And what is impressed upon the soul can then access those forces. So it's just an interesting idea. So if a human being is tied to the universe, the soul, then when you imprint a symbol on our soul, that gives access to those forces. It's an interesting idea. So this ties to the idea of the macrocosm and mankind is the little universe, or the microcosm. And it ties to the idea of the anima mundi, or world soul, and the spiritus mundi, the spirit of the world. This idea talked about throughout the ages by Agrippa and many others, and of course elaborated in modern occultism by Eliphas Levi or Alphonse Louis Constant. So we take this idea of a world soul, we take this idea of macrocosm and microcosm, then maybe we can understand how a glyph like the tree of life, how contemplating a symbol can impress the soul, and because of the tie between the human soul and the universe, is able to access real forces of Mars and Venus, able to access those energies. And one could even take this, I don't like the over-psychologizing of magic exactly, and I think any theory is only good insofar as it can help us with like a stepping stone, But it's an idea that symbols impressed upon the soul can help us contact those energies, because we're tied to the universal soul. We're tied to the cosmos. And if you also think of an individual as like a ravine or lagoon tied to a larger sea, we're fed with energies from the greater sea or ocean, right? Like we're all just like harbors, not harbors, we're lagoons that pull water from the ocean. That's the human soul tied to the cosmic soul or the universal soul, or the human being tied to the macrocosm or greater universe. So through this, we are able to perhaps access knowledge with divination. Okay, how can you clear your mind and contact higher information? You know, people talk about all kinds of things like Akashic records and all that. And if the human soul is a reservoir that connects us to the greater, what is beyond us, then there could be a giving and a receiving of energy. From that, we can receive forces and we can send up. Okay, looking at Baphomet's image where he points upwards, salve, we send out. And then what we send into the astral light or energy imprinted upon it coagulates as the material cosmos, which is how the universal energy could be said to manifest into form. Because the astral light is a realm of illusions, one could say, even things that they are, you know, a collection of impressions. But if we can harness the will and the reasoning faculty and the will and the emotions and the passions, and we can harness the willpower and the imagination, the theory goes that we can impress the astral light. That salve, we send the energy up. What is sent up must fall down. Coagula becomes material form. So, you know, and it's pan from another perspective, the all. Just something to think about. So I've been thinking about this, you know, how could the tree of life help us to access true forces? Because of the macrocosm and microcosm, because it's above so below. Because when we impress the tree of life upon the soul by contemplating the tree of life and the Sephiroth, this impression upon the soul gives us access to those forces without. And of course, when you're talking about things like this, without and within and up and down, like... Anyway, so that's just some thoughts on the tree of life and how one can view it, possibly, that contemplating the tree of life may be able to give us access to forces in the macrocosm, because the affinity between microcosm and macrocosm. And really that's just taking age-old occult concepts, you know, it's been talked about throughout the ages, and applying it to something like the tree of life. So it's cool to think about these ideas, but I try to not be dogmatic or believe in any one thing. I try to keep the mind open. We're not going to reason our way to the infinite, right? But the reasoning faculty is a tool that can be used. And that's another thing with the tree of life. By contemplating the symbols, we reach upwards. We could take step by step. You know, it's a tool for receiving inspirations and higher knowledge. You know, maybe we can't fathom the infinite, but we can use this as a tool to contemplate. We may have realizations. Perhaps the soul can ascend. Maybe if we imprint the tree of life enough upon our soul and we imprint it, then we are building our own ladder upwards of ascent. And then we go through the process, through the Sephiroth and through the paths. We are actually ascending. We're building our ladder within us as we ascend. We're building our chariot. So... anyways, just some thoughts on the tree of life and how perhaps it can help us to access, you know, forces in the macrocosm. So, just a quick video for y'all tonight. I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for joining me, and I guess I'll see y'all in the next video. Have a great day, y'all. Thank you.